Camilla. For a while, I thought that I'd have a career in reading tarot cards, but I just didn't see a future in it. Ugh, that's the worst joke I've told on here. It is so bad. Hello, everybody, and welcome to What Magic Is This? A podcast about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the weird. My name is Douglas Batchelor, and today we have a big one, a huge one, in fact. Not unlike astrology, we will be covering a topic that, well, basically has many podcasts devoted to it exclusively. And books. My goodness, so many books. The topic, of course, is the tarot, and I am joined by someone who, for me, is the person from whom to get only the best advice for reading cards. A former tenured university professor who holds not one, but 2 PhDs. A person who brings in creativity, intuition, Zen, and martial arts to read like the devil. She also holds the award for the most adorable dog in the tarot world. I am joined today by the one and only Dr. Camelia Elias. Camelia, how are you?
Well, that's some introduction. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much for the invite. Yeah, I like to show up on podcasts, whose title is "What Magic Is This?"
There we go.
Because where I come from, at least nowadays, since retiring from my university position, although I don't know because they're not mutually exclusive, but where I come from these days to any kind of activity is the question,
Right. Where is the magic?
How do we answer questions? How do we pose them? Maybe that's the more interesting. What kind of questions can we come up with? So, and in the world of cartomancy, in the world of divination, mind you, I was a professor of literature, literature and culture. So when you read literature, you read with view to getting very close to an author's, trying to grapple with exactly that, a question.
Exactly.
So what's what's closest to somebody's heart? So I'm always interested in that, and then when I say I'm always interested with the certain emphasis on that, I don't mean to suggest that we look at only the surface, things, right. Cliches. And I'm like, here is a cliche question, although they can also have their function, but so what do we really want to know? So what does an author really want to know when they write whatever it is that they do, from fiction to criticism, whatever. So, so I'm invested in that. So of course, if your podcast is "What Magic Is This?"
That's right.
I'm like, okay, can I throw the cards for that?
Definitely. Let's start with a somewhat cliched question then. Now, I would hope that most folks would know what the tarot is, but for those that don't, Camelia, what is the tarot?
Well, what is the tarot? Cards.
They're cards.
The tarot, let's go with the pedestrian way. So the tarot is a set of cards, a set of 78 cards. Although, mind you, again, depending on what tradition you're dealing with, some can also come in larger packs. We talk about the Florentine masters, or the Minchiate decks, from the 1700s, the 94 cards. So you can have anything from 64, 78, 94, all these numbers, yeah. But what we associate with the tarot currently, or the standard tarot, let's call it that way, is the set that consists of 78 cards. So we have the regular playing card deck, that everybody knows, and then added to that, we have a set of 22 cards that we call the trump cards, cards that feature, I'm safe functions that right. We identify from our daily, doings and goings and activities. A lot of people in the tarot world would talk about these 22 cards as representing archetypes, right. Bigger forces, like we have things like the emperor, the empress, the pope, and the hermit, so they each represent an attitude. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So actually, that comes closer to the ways in which I like to think of what these trump cards represent, functions. Yeah. But a lot of others, they prefer to see them as symbols of power, symbols of, retreat, if we are there with a hermit, for instance. But when we try and go beyond the symbol, but beyond the symbolic language, that is also constrained to a cliche understanding, then, we get to the essential function of what each of these figures end up representing, So, and as far as I'm concerned, because I'm interested in what meets the eye, the first level order of signification, and I cast 3 cards, I get the Empress or the Emperor, and I can instantly see somebody in power, sitting heavily, or maybe not so heavily, on their throne, sitting the sovereignty, maybe having a scepter in their hand. So before I think, the Emperor equals power, what I see is just somebody who supposedly rules over a territory, right?
Right.
So I prefer to think of these 22 trumps as embodying functions more than embodying symbolic significations. And the reason why I'm a little bit cautious about the symbolic vocabulary that goes into describing the tarot cards in general, it's because of the ambiguity that each symbol has. By definition, a symbol can represent several things at the same time. So, in divination settings, unless you are interested in conducting or giving a lecture
right.
about, I don't know, your shadow, whatever, is in vogue at the time, I don't find it very useful, when I sit there with somebody who just wants to know how they got them stock, is doing at the stock market,
right.
Then you don't go to say, yes, and here is a card that shows you a lot of healing, if we are with the card called Temperance,
Right.
A lot of people like to they see that and they instantly impose on that card this set meaning that comes from some, often random books, on the tarot, depending on what people read, and that if it's one of those, that either deal with the psychology of things or that deal with questions about the self, how are we relating to others, to the world, and here is Temperance, the angel of moderation, holding 2 chalices in her hands, and that's all about the water, and water symbolizes healing. And I'm like, maybe. I'm like, fuck off, can we just get down to the nitty-gritty essentials? So when I sit there with the person who wants to know how their stock fares, and I don't start to that kind of thing, it's like, today we are sitting here with let's invoke the power of, we're not here with the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation or some other stuff, from the Kabbalistic world. So we just sit with what we actually see, So now let's stick with this example now that I have it in my head. If somebody wants to know whether they invest or not, I will say, maybe you should hold your horses for a while.
Right.
don't do anything major. Maybe you should just exert some moderation. So I would never go past this first level signification that I would immediately use as it relates back to the man's question, or the woman's question. That can also be. Women are also interested in stock these days.
Yes, they are.
So again, depending on the nature of every person's question, I go and read the cards with an eye for the functionality of each card. If we talk about particularly how the use of the trump cards, and in my own practice, because I use the Marseille cards, the Marseille Tarot, which is a set that became popular around 1650 or thereabout. So it'll be very crudely woodcut, images, so we don't have this loaded cards, somebody's artistic take, that may or may not have anything to do with anything. So I sit with these rather primitive cards, and I just fire my so-called functions rather than symbols at people. But naturally, I always start with the question, and that's when I said that I was amused at the name of your podcast, and I instantly wanted, well, maybe we'll do that. We'll answer that. What magic is this? I'm going to cast 3 cards for it and see what
I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, but so the tarot. What is the tarot? So it's a tool for divination. That the 78 cards. And then we have the playing cards, the regular playing card set. And then the 22 that are more interesting perhaps to look at because there is a figurative image, although they all feature images. The 8 of Swords also has an imagery. But yeah, so I don't know who are we talking to again, because indeed if it's somebody who's never heard of the tarot and how which cards have images on them and which don't, or which cards have more abstract imagery represented on them and which have also these types that I have just talked about, not in the sense of archetypes, but just types that fulfill a cultural function. We have, the tarot that most people are familiar with, which is the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot,
right?
Designed by occultist, Edward Waite and the illustrator Pamela Coleman Smith in around 1909. It came out. Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that Pamela Coleman Smith did was to revolutionize a bit, the whole pack, and we go from a set that features the regular playing cards deck, the 4 suits, and you have just that more or less abstract representation of, hearts or cups, in this case, there has been a transposition of,
right.
We go from clubs to batons, or wands, depending on what school you are with, we go from coins or pentacles, or diamonds, from diamonds from the playing card set to coins or pentacles and so on. So, so what Pamela Coleman Smith did was to simply just illustrate, offer small vignettes for all of the cards,
Right.
So the 22 trumps, as we know them, more or less from the Marseille tarot, the Marseille imagery, though we have another tarot deck that precedes the popular Marseille tarot, the Visconti Sforza tarot, which is one of the first that we have in an almost full form. I think there are only 2 cards missing from that one. So we actually know what the Visconti Sforza look like. So the imagery on that tarot is a bit different from what we find on the Marseille tarot. But generally, we start with those 22 figures, who are interesting to look at from a cultural perspective, and then we have the playing card set with the abstract imagery. But now in Pamela Coleman Smith's rendition with set scenes, Now I don't know. I'm not, although I read with that standard tarot. Just for fun, but in my own practice, in my own professional practice, meaning that, when I read for people who pay me money to do so, I read with the Marseille tarot. Mainly, I read with the playing cards, and I read with an oracle that's called the Lenormand cards. Mm-hmm. That all came around 1800. So, so that's like that. These are the cards that I operate. So yeah, so we have different languages, if you like, visual languages that we go through as we look at the individual card decks, that we now have, coming down through history to us from the Visconti Sforza, Marseille tarot. Then we have another big one, of course, that came almost around the same time already. It springs out of the same tradition as the Waite-Smith tarot, and that's the Aleister Crowley and Lady Frida Harris deck called the Thoth tarot or the Thoth tarot, right. Which is also a production of the Hermetic Order of Golden Dawn. So we start there with the occultists who took quite a bit from the French occultists. So So there is a lot of traditions that kind of come together around the turn of the previous century, when people would devise or add on to the already known system, going back to 1750, when there is this wig maker, or we don't even know what he was. Some say he was a mason, Etea.
That's
His
right.
name was Etea, So one of the things that he also did that revolutionized the way in which we work with the cards was actually to import. I mean, this is just speculation. Nobody really knows. I mean, if you listen to what he himself said in his book, types of reading cards, or la manière, the modes of how you read a set of cards. So I learned it from an Italian. He said, so okay, and then some gypsies there, so it's all very fine, and then okay, let's throw in some Orientalism, and then with the Golden Dawn, they say, but the Kabbalah has to be. Eliphas Levi comes along, and the Comte de Gebelin, So I mean, there's a whole French school, if you like, the esoteric French school that contributed to the ways in which the English tarot, the Anglo world, as like the Crowley tarot and the Waite Smith tarot ended up looking like, So these occultists, they had an eye for what the French did around the 1760 through 1800 and then onwards. So now there's a lot of history. There's also a lot of speculation about all of that. So now if you ask me, I mean, I don't know. I'm training in philosophy among things, So I like the solid logic, Right. So if I do read on these histories, I read them with an eye for first of all, what fascinates me is how do people think, So and it's fascinating to think about how people think in terms of systems of correspondences. It's like, oh man. Crowley was a master, and like here is a box, and then here is another box. Although on occasion he would get it so wrong, I mean, when I think about his associations of the tarot with the Kabbalistic and Gematria and all of this numerology, and then he would get the Hebrew letters wrong in places, and then people will be dead set that, oh, this is the thing, I have to follow his instructions for either this or that ritual, or the divination, or conjuring demons, and I don't know. And then, I read the thing, and then if you know another thing, as it were, then you realize, like, man, a whole world managed to get themselves deluded, that they think that I did this. So I laugh at that. I mean, honest to God. So that's not exactly what I'm interested in, other than from the perspective of noticing that this is a good story. Yeah. Whatever Crowley did was very fascinating, and it makes me laugh a lot, and I like to laugh. So, but where my heart or where my own allegiance lies with is actually, again, as I said, with the question. I'm interested in what kind of questions we can pose to this visual text. And then if we put down 3 cards or a whole spread, mind you, the standard tarot, or the way in which, let's just say, or what popularized the standard tarot was also a list, if you like, of positions. I mean, you will find that the market is flooded, at least with a lot of books, that present people with spreads, so-called spreads. One of the most classic being the Celtic cross, so-called. Is not neither too old nor is it Celtic. So, but so anyway, so the spiel there is that you have cards locked in position, and you start with, this is you, this is what crosses you, this card is beneath you, that is the card that suggests your past or what you can control. This the card above is your ambition, So we operate with some commonsensical metaphors, which are excellent, Yes, give me this world of metaphors, because after all, that's my trade. So this is the future, this is the past, this is your neighbor, this is your enemy, and this is and then you just pull a card from your 78 tarot deck, and then you sit there and you say, oh man, I would never have thought that my own husband is also my enemy. I mean,
Oh my God.
oh my God. So imagine to have a revelation like that. So, I mean,
Right.
around the 60s when people started to discover the uses of the tarot for those kind of questions, questions of the self, identity questions, they were in for a major entertainment, because I mean, honest to God, nothing is more exciting than to hear about who hates you and who loves you and how you can deal with the bastards, you know what I mean?
Right.
Them to hell and all this at the same time, under the more noble, perhaps, because that has also been passed down to us from the Masons and the Rosicrucians and I don't know what orders, that, you have to transcend all this mundane shit, right? You have to be interested in how you can elevate your soul. So, okay, so when you're done with your nasty neighbors and all that, then you'll want to read the cards with a view to how you can elevate your own soul,
Right.
There are a million of books out there that will present you with nothing but this kind of spreads, devised all according to the different contexts, different situations, from the mundane to the more extraordinary, if you like, including, I suppose, modalities of saying hi to the devil at the crossroads, if that should be your fancy, what should I do? What's the best thing to do? So no problem there. So the tarot on one hand not only answers or gives us an opportunity to answer some questions that are of any order, but at the same time it's mighty entertaining.
Yes.
It's very, very entertaining to see what exactly can arise, when you have your thing in your mind, as it were, you have what's on your mind, however deep or however elevated a thought, however mundane or nasty, it doesn't matter, so it's, if you approach it with a measure of honesty, you will have an opportunity to actually see a story arising that can parallel either what you already know or else open the door to a whole other vista, things that you didn't even realize exist or are possible, So I think that's the part that I'm actually also attracted to. So, so what is possible and what is probable, what is likely, so when we operate with some educated guesses on the basis of what we see here articulated in this visual language, I would say that our lives get a bit more enriched. And then there is also the other aspect of it that's called testing, so you can especially if you engage with predictive readings, and this is one of the exercises that we do by default in my classes, for instance. I just always say, well, people answer, so how do you get better at this? And that's how you get better at it, but practice, practice makes perfect, so throw down 3 cards.
Read more books. That'll make you better.
Yeah, that too, but I mean, like for here and now, it's like all you can do is like you want to practice, so throw down 3 cards and say, okay, I want to know if the postman will deliver my mail before lunch or after lunch. Right. So, or I mean, let's just, so you throw down 3 cards and then you make a prediction, right? So in that sense, it's no different than doing horary astrology, that's the astrology of the hour, so not reading nativity charts, natal charts, but the charts, the event charts, so it's exactly the same. It's the same game, if you like, so predictive game. So you just test it, and then you say, oh, if you see that you got it all wrong, you go back and you look at the cards again and say, okay, why did I get it wrong? Often I say, in my teaching context, I say, the cards are always right, and people are reluctant, and I myself am reluctant and say, what kind of nonsense are you talking about? Just listen to yourself. So you can't even, and then because it sounds like that, you can't give it to others, but I have come to realize, at least based on experience, that indeed, if I do miss a prediction, it's because I have misinterpreted what I saw in the pictures, so it's like I get overly overly excited about something, or it's like this other thing, that our brains always plays such games, on us, or, it tricks us, do we always want to see in the cards or in any situation that which we most prefer,
Right.
So even though we often approach the cards from an apprehensive situation or attitude, or it's like, oh, I'm afraid of, I'm not sure I want to know. Of course, we always hope for the best. And although you come with the worst fear to the cards, at the same time, what is also articulated in the sphere, or what arises out of the sphere, is the hope for the best. Right. And then, of course, that hope often, in my experience, I've noticed, contaminates your interpretation capacity. In the sense that instead of you reading the cards or reading the visual cues from the cards with the cold head, no, you are also hot, Somehow you think that this has to do with emotions, because, okay, so some occultists also have this notion that you have to be so inflamed. And then it's like, this is yet this other thing that I can never quite comprehend, is like, how can you think that divination or any of these other, or the necromancy, or has anything to do with getting yourself passionately inflamed? Like you want to conjure, I don't know, aquatic spirits, and all of a sudden it's like hell, I want to be inflamed. So thanks, I want to keep a cool head here, So in my experience, if I don't get a prediction to around this point, I don't even know where I'm going with this. But I always go back to the cards if I miss a prediction, and then look again at how I see the elements of the cards among themselves interact. So what's the synthesis? Can we derive a synthesis that arises, let's just say, from the ways in which a configuration of 3 cards presents itself to us, so what's the story there, so what have I missed, and often if I put in the time to reflect a little bit, then I see it, and I mean, in hindsight it's also easier to see. But then I see, and then I just I make a note of it, make a mental note of it. The next time I ask, when will I get my mail, before lunch or after lunch? I try to have my head a little bit cooler than yesterday. And that's the end of it. So it's all in the what modalities you have, to reading this visual text, and that's where we depart. I guess the diviners, I know myself, some are very good, even though they take their point of departure in this more symbolic language, so they can still hit the nerve, and they do a good job. They can be coherent, they can be on point. As I also know people who do pretty much what I do, but when it comes down to it, I guess as far as I'm concerned, I'm just interested in precision, so it's like, how can we be a bit more precise about what we see, and then relay that, instead of losing ourselves in something that's totally inessential. So I'm always trying to, in my own practice, I'm trying to not say too many unnecessary things or do unnecessary things. So, that's the Zen, my Zen training that won't deny itself. So I don't have a lot of patience for a lot of nonsense. So I read the cards, also with people just getting a sense of can you hear that? How my fingers, can I just do that? So can the answer just fall straight on my table, as it were? Right. And then can I also have this feeling that there is no doubt about the ways in which I see what arises? So that's the challenge that I work with on myself or in my practice. Now I always want to go to meet that challenge, head on, and then say, okay, so let's see, how good are you really? Or are you so full of shit? On occasion, it has to happen. But I guess that's the entertaining part, that we swing like the pendulum. So sometimes Definitely. It makes a lot of sense, and sometimes we are so full of shit that you cannot believe it. And that's just the way it is. Yeah. But what magic is this? Yeah, but the easiest way is actually to simplify. Shouldn't I just let's see. Now you can see me, so you see my set here.
I can see you've got your cards out. You've got a Tarot de Marseille there.
The Tarot de Marseille, as reconstructed by Jean-Claude Flornois. He died a few years back, but his cards are still with us and in circulation.
The place where he is from, I forget the name of the town in France, is Saint Suzanne, I want to say.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
All over town, they have depictions of his tarot trumps.
Exactly.
All over the village.
Yeah, I love that. Isn't it nice? Yeah. I mean, talk about the town that's not prejudiced.
Right, exactly.
But then the French, they have always had another attitude towards the whole divination system with the cards. Although obviously they also think that there is a lot of superstition that may be carried over into into the practices of divining with the cards, and then people just like everywhere else, they say, "Oh, stay away from me." I don't want to know anything about. But at the same time, they acknowledge the fact that these cards, have been can be traced, to the Renaissance, can be traced, and that they appear in all sorts of texts, they appear also to represent, at least if we talk about that culture, or that history, they appear to be associated with the virtues, for instance. Now I just mentioned temperance, as one of the virtues of prudence. If we talk about the Minchiate deck, we will have more of, of those virtues and vices also, So the French, they acknowledge that history, that some of this visual imagery refers to all these medieval texts, not quite medieval, Renaissance texts, magical texts, texts invested in alchemy, So and when you look at that part of it, I mean, nobody who exercises some kind of distinction, would be caught dead, dismissing the cards because they supposedly also carry a superstitious nerve, in them, or whatever. So that's not necessarily the case in the English-speaking world, or the continental, So some things got lost there when we, or I don't know, the Americans, So they imported something else there. So, and then it turned into self-help,
Right. Self-actualization through the cards. Why do you think that, because you're a fan of the kind of cards, there's a specific kind of tarot cards called the Tarot de Marseille. They were produced in the 17th or 16th century in Marseille, France. Why do you think that this particular kind of deck is so appealing to a lot of people that are tarot aficionados like yourself? I mean, you use the Flornois, John Noblet tarot. Why this specific deck?
Well, this hasn't been the case, No. I can actually remember 10 years ago, nobody even heard of the Marseille tarot.
Right.
There were very few, depending again on where you come from. So if you are from France, then you will have heard of it. But within the English-speaking world, the very few had access to the Marseille tarot, and then if they did have access to it, it didn't appeal so much because it's difficult to read the pip cards. While I can see, what's happening, on the temperance cards, or when I see death,
Right.
Then again, I get a vibration. I get filled with anxiety or something. When you look at six hearts aligned, then you think, and what does that mean? I don't know what that means. I can't read that. So I think that much of the aversion, actually, rather than appeal, to the Marseille tarot has been connected with people's inability to actually make sense of the pip cards, But that has a turn, it has happened maybe 10 years ago, something like that, and I participated in it myself, in the sense that I started writing more officially. Because I saw what was happening in there, and I thought, all this stuff and all this, let me check with my navel today and see how how is my state of mind, So I thought, but you can do so many other things with the tarot, and then all the long-windedness, So when I came from my European background, I was born in Romania, and I also have some tradition that that informs my reading practice from that part of the world. Though I've been living in Denmark now over 30 years, so when I as it fell into the American context, let's put it that way. So I was a bit surprised, and I thought, yeah, but you can use these cards for so much more,
Yeah.
And then also this long-windedness, what I was looking for was like, okay, but can you be coherent, or where is the story going? So what I noticed was an actual lack of a point. Like, can you make a point to this? So I wasn't so too keen on hearing people lecturing me on archetypes. Gosh, even to this day, that so puts me off, right? Even when it can be about a fascinating story. Whatever. So I thought, well, let me remedy this. I started the blog, on Tarot Reflections, and it became very popular quickly, because people just saw how I was just firing my so-called messages. I was like reading a 3-card string, and it's like, oh wow. And yeah, that didn't take you half an hour. Well, no, that took me 3 seconds, And people wanted to say, how did you do that? And it's like, how is it? So nowadays, and after this exploration of, or rather opening the doors to something, and I don't want to give myself credit for it, because there are others who have done the same thing. And when I was looking for people within the American context, for instance, and that applies to England as well, when I was looking for people who did similar things, not based in France, that's the different thing, or based in Romania, but within the American context, I had a hard time finding them.
For sure.
Then I'm resilient, So I keep searching, So one day I stumbled over Enrique Enriquez, in New York. I don't know if you heard of his name. I thought, fuck yes, finally somebody, finally in New York. Although I don't know, given that he's from Venezuela, so that so they have it there. But never mind. So he's based in New York, and then I thought, oh, he's doing what I'm doing. He's doing what I think that we should all be doing. So without the proscriptive, because after all, I don't give a fuck about what people do and don't do. But in terms of how we can enrich the world, or how we can actually move over that threshold, whether tarot is all about self-help, or it's all about just me in relation to a million of other things, and then you forget all about, you forget the world, Right. You think that you relate yourself, you ask questions about how you relate yourself to the world, but then when I hear the discourse, I hear that actually the world is not even present there. It's all about you in right. Some kind of bubble. But meanwhile, we talk about community building and I don't know. And then I'm like, all these cliches, whatever. So, so I thought, where are the people who do something else that's more interesting than this? And then I found Enrique, and then I approached him, and because I run Icorn Press, which is a publishing house that I started when I was still a bona fide academic with the university. So it started in collaboration with 5 other universities. So we put out books, that explored the creative imagine, the human imagination, which of course the occult world is filled with. Because yep. Inherently the occult world, deals with what is mysterious. Let's put it that way. Or we have what you would find in poetry, an appeal to what astonishes us. It's like, oh, can I find something that just places me in that state where I say, man, this is sublime.
Right.
So we put out books, that kind of addressed that aspect of things, dealing with the human imagination, and still retain the rigorous academic approach to different things. So we published the books, that within the genres of from poetry to drama to criticism. But then I thought, I would like to publish Enrique, and with Icon Press, and so I published his tarology book, and then I published 2 of his interview books, and then I published the 4th one, linguistic, which so I was. To begin with, people are like, "Oh, what the hell is this?" And then to the point where sometimes I even had actually people coming to me and say, "What were you thinking?" Like to publish this person, and then and then
Really?
because I don't have a problem sending such people to hell, because you are welcome to ask me what are you thinking, but then can I hear your argument for your being so appalled, other than just presenting me with that attitude of I'm appalled what you did here. Right. And it's like, okay, thank you for your emotions. I acknowledge them, wow, that so excites me. Thank you. No, thanks. So, so it didn't take off so quickly because people were like, I don't get this, and then I thought, okay, so Enrique did this thing. And then I thought, well, let me put out the Marseille Tarot towards the art of reading, and then suddenly, like, boom, so people found it extraordinary, actually, and then I'm very, very grateful to everybody who picks it up, and then I kept going, and then I said, okay, let's look at how we can get down to being a bit more precise about what we're doing here. And can we also look at the clock, while we're doing it, so can we arrive at what we see at the very essential within the first 5 seconds, after when we look at the cards, because naturally once you see what you see, and I'm always interested in my ability to see the obvious, because you see, coming also from the world of poetry, one of the things that the poets are so good at is, in fact, while using ambiguous language for poetic reasons or whatever reasons, what they're after is, getting us to understand that the obvious is what eludes us forever. The Zen masters are all about that. It's like, can you see the obvious or not? So we read the string of 3 cards, and I always have this at the back of my head. I'm reading for the obvious, right. And it can elude me and it can resist me a lot, but I still want to get down to getting a sense of of where that obviousness, if you like, can get me. Can it get me to a place where I can now either make a decision? So it's like that kind of concreteness. Of course, once you see the obvious, you can easily spend the whole evening or the whole day or a whole year, mind you, right. Contemplating, unpacking what you see. That's a different process, that belongs also to that hermeneutic or interpretative, analytical approach, So, but to begin with, like, can we see this, from that spontaneous impulse that is, however, not the result of, I'm being so intuitive. Right. And, like, there are so many intuitives, with all due respect, and I know I always piss them off, those who like to throw the intuitive word about, without actually having an understanding of what being intuitive means. I mean, if anybody asks me, and I always volunteer, my answer is the intuitive equals clarity. Yeah. And what I have seen, the ways in which most people use the word the intuitive or the new age, and we have a lot of that in the tarot world, a lot of new age approach. Yeah? Now, of course, that people have turned away from that. And now let's do history. Let's do Marseille tarot history. Oh, everybody's so into, this card back or right. Or this design, or there is an extra flower here. All fine, but I mean, I don't know where is it going. From a divination point of view, it's not going anywhere. I mean, that's just it's excellent. We always want to know how people think, at any given point in time. But when we sit there with a concrete question, if you ask me, I want to give an equally concrete answer. And I don't need to know anything about the deck's history and how it looks and who designed it and all that stuff. I simply just look at what's in front of me, at images, and I look, and then I start doing art history, basically, you know, like art history 101, when they teach you to pay attention to the line and the point, you know. And you start with that, you start with color, you know, it's like, is anything that hits you, you know, that's like, oh, I see something is off here. Where is the odd, you know? So I always start with noticing these aspects, you know, in the cards. Where is the tension? You know, speaking of astonishment, you know, is there anything that astonishes me? I mean, I taught a lot of poetry at the university. I mean, it's exactly the same thing, you know, that people say, oh, I can't get into poetry because, you know, it's too goddamn difficult, you know. And so, okay, so what do you start with? Start with what resists you, you know. Start with noticing what the tension is. Okay, that's a good tip, you know. My students to say, okay, so when you notice what resists you, then can you pay attention to other formal properties in the text, you know, and that can be represented by metaphors or tropes, or, you know, the language is odd or weird or something, the sounds, you know, or so you start to that same thing with the cards, you know. So it's never about, oh, the emperor means power and the empress means the nurturing lover and the mother. And I mean, like, all this means that has never been my cup of tea, and I never approach the cards with that, you know. So although we can arrive at some signification, right? You know, because we can't escape it. You know, but before you get there, what I'm interested in is like the process has to be accountable, if you like, for, you know, the ways in which we go from A to B. Is there a logical progression, or is just me talking interminably like I'm doing now?
One of the things that I think is most important that I've got from your work is the importance of questions and asking the right questions. So you had your cards out. Let's ask, indeed, what magic is this?
Yeah, what magic is this? Okay, so exactly. So let's see, you know. Well, let's see. I'm just gonna, you can hear it. I tap the cards, so, and then I just cut. When people want to know, I always say I cut to the left hand because that's how I learned it.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Cut to the left hand. I don't know. It just became so ingrained. So let's see. Okay, so now because you can actually see, I'm going to hold the card so you can see them, and then I will mention them for the audience. So what is this?
So the first card we have is La Mort, which is death. Right.
So we got La Mort, Force, and Le Pape.
That's right.
So, you know, yeah. So this is an interesting set of cards, you know, because I mean, what is how you say, oh, okay, so okay, how can you spot the obvious now? What magic is this? And I'm like, now see, here we come to how do we read the first card here? You know, it's like death, you know. So are we going to start to saying this magic, whatever it is, it's deadly.
It's deadly.
Or whatever it is, it's death. Maybe death. Yeah, death to what? Then you want to ask, right? So you can see how a follow-up question immediately starts to present itself. You know, so your brain becomes like really, it feels the pressure, or maybe just nailing it. You know, whatever it is nailing it. You know, because we have this man here with the size. You know, and often we think of the size. You know, of death. You know, as being fraught, you know, or fraught, I don't know, suggesting, let's just say death suggests a certain urgency, right? Like you don't negotiate, you know. So of course now, given that we talk about cards and divination, so I don't know, of course, if we had to be, we would have to be more concrete. What magic is this? Are we talking about your podcast, or are we talking about the topic that you invited me to present, something about here? So, you know, so if we talk about my own practice, I would say, well, what magic is this? You know, so referring to divination, I would say, well, it's the magic of learning how to nail it, you know, how to grapple with resistance. You know, we have La Force, you know, we have the woman there forcing that mouth open for those that don't have the cards in front of you. So we have a woman, you know, anyway, we don't know, is she forcing that mouth open or is she trying to stuff something down the lion's throat? Who's to tell, you know? In context, of course, all of these considerations begin to make sense, you know, in context, yeah. So because there are situations when we can talk about this woman stuffing down, stuffing something down this lion's throat, or is trying to pry its mouth open, you know. And then again, the next question is what, and what's the purpose of that? Yeah. Right. Or else simply we're more generally here with the situation of dominance, you know. So you want to get above this creature that doesn't even share your nature. So we are here with the human nature as against animal nature, right? So we start to death. What magic is this? Whatever it is, it's deadly. Whatever it is like death to something. Yeah? Nailing it, perhaps. Yeah. And then, of course, because we are with death as with the size, you know, you're gonna feel that cut. You know, some bleeding is involved. So maybe there's some resistance involved. There is some kind of remnant. We have all these heads here down on the floor, as you can see.
Right.
But it's almost as if, you know, they reappear, one would say, if we talk about how we use the method of paying attention, not to symbol, but rather to what happens in the cards, you know, the transposition of elements from one card to the other. So these dead heads here, they seem to not stay dead, you know, they try to get bigger here in front of this woman. And these two heads now become one bigger one, you know, like and it's like, okay, whatever it is, you know, what magic is this, whatever it is, you think you sit there and you have the power to cut right through it, maybe cut to the essentials. If we talk about divination, I mean, and we want to that because that would be the aim, or at least that's my aim. But maybe there is always some remnant there, you know, that your cut is not so clean. So when your cut is not so clean, you have to, you know, if the decapitated heads here, if you don't bury them immediately, they're gonna be, you know, like nice Romanian strigoi style, you know. We are always ever so in the Romanian context, we're ever so afraid of dead people coming back. You see,
right.
if you don't perform the funeral rites properly, then they have a way of coming to life again, and you don't want that. So, you know, so perhaps it's a situation with, you know, after you get down to the essentials, you know, indeed, if we talk about the essentials, and there is always one point that remains, or one thing that needs your attention. And we can talk about the woman here in the La Force card as doing that, paying attention, or taking, being challenged or overcoming, you know, this essential point that you are not quite done with. Yeah. Right. And why are you not quite done with? Because apparently, you know, once you are dealing with that head, you know, the two heads that now become one head. See the heads, it's nice. How beautiful, yeah. So now you ask me why I like the Marseille tarot, because of this. So I have two heads down here on the floor after death is decapitating them. They now turn into the one bigger head that is the lion's head. And then in the Pope card, we have there the Pope doing his ritual or liturgy, whatever. And then we have two heads again. Yeah,
that's right.
The disciples. So you can see that I would say, what magic is this? Is this the magic of being able to cut shit to the essentials, you know, and at the same time, you know, taking care of that one thing that remains, you know, what the legacy of these two, you know, like what kind of head are we now dealing with, you know, and then putting that content into the heads of the disciples. So bringing it further, or putting it out into the world, teaching. Yeah. So a Pope is invested in teaching. A Pope is invested in blessing, if you like. Here is a blessing, you know, or here is a transmission. So, you know, so we what magic is this? Well, maybe it's about that, how you transmit the very essential, yeah, that you can manage to cut down to. Yeah. So there you have it, you know. So, okay, that took me more than 2 seconds. I'm so loud. But that's it, you know. So as you can see, I didn't go say transformation. Death means, I don't know. or force means power, or force means dominance, or the Pope means a spiritual teacher. I mean, like, honestly, I don't want to sound ever so obnoxious, yeah, but I just don't have patience myself for that kind of discourse. I don't see that it's going anywhere. Unless you manage to tell me a very goddamn fascinating story about how death means death, and how the Pope means a spiritual teacher, and how force means, or strength, dominance. Unless you can tell me a better story, you're not going to catch me, so my heart is not going to be moved in any way. And and I have an aversion for shit that doesn't move me, because after all, my life is short. So I prefer the stuff that moves me in one way or another. So yeah, so what magic is this? So maybe now in the general, or the more if we go outside of the divination context, that I was thinking that what magic is this related to divination, related to what I'm doing, your guest, yeah. But you can see how it can actually apply to what you are doing, to your intent. You also want to make some transmissions, but transmissions of what? You don't want to waste people's time, do you?
No.
So hopefully your guests, they can stay on topic on something, or I don't know, say something interesting,
They usually do.
Say something essential, so that can transmit perhaps that which can move us, or an element of the obvious that always eludes us. I don't know, something like that.
For sure. Camelia, that was wonderful. I just feel like I sat in on a masterclass of reading. This has been such a fantastic pleasure. And I hope, I have to say, I literally asked 3 questions this entire episode, but my goodness, you provided almost all of the answers. You went through almost everything that I wanted to talk about. Camelia, you have so much going on. Tell us about your website. Tell us about, are you still doing readings? Tell us about Aradia Academy, the courses you have coming up, and maybe what's next. The people need to know.
I don't know what people need to know. Oh, people, sometimes I feel like, oh, yeah. Those who are like you, they find you. That's my philosophy, So, but since I'm here, what I'm doing. Aradia Academy, after I retired from my professorship, and because there was a lot of people, interested in what I was doing, so let me just put out some courses, and then I made some magic, with my very first group of people, and because they suggested, why don't you start a school, and I thought, well, why not? Then let's start it together. So we actually did some very nice magic. And then we started offering some courses, foundation courses. Now my very popular foundation courses that I have run for a number of years now, related to how we read with the Marseille tarot, how we read with the Lenormand oracle, and how we read with playing cards. Now that those essential foundation courses have been turned into books. So if somebody wants to actually know the stuff that I would emphasize in a teaching setting, it's like I would have lots of that. They are all student driven, examples, so it's like students would offer their readings in plenum there. I mean, I would sit with 100 people. And then I would say, okay, this what you did good and where you fucked up, So then I picked on all the readings that were really fucked up, And I said, so okay, so this is all fucked, So let's see how we can repair this or why this happened. Right. So I think that a lot of people found that kind of approach to teaching very useful, because it's like, okay, so it's not based on any kind of lecturing and there isn't a lot of history. I have a little pamphlet about the history of the tarot if someone is interested, a bit tongue-in-cheek, I talk about the 3 main traditions, the Rider-Waite-Smith, the Todd Tarot, and the Marseille Tarot, So I mean, I don't go into the early history of the tarot because that's not. We don't have so much divination there, My own area of focus is divination practices and philosophy of divination rather than history. So so there is that. But I wrote how many books 15 books in this category. I mean, I wrote many more, but I don't suppose that they are of any interest to those who are not necessarily academics or invested in literature and poetry. But related to divination, so I would say read Like the Devil trilogy.
Yes.
That will teach you everything you need to know. Or else, keep an eye on Aradia Academy's courses. The next one, in fact, so speaking of the reading cards, the next one I'm launching here, and I hope to have it to have the class form here in April. Relates to the 3-card challenge, like you just do a 3 cards. So instead of losing ourselves in the infamous
many cards
spreads, we don't do spreads. We just look at a string of 3 cards, and then we look at the challenges that can hit us. Like right here. I mean, in my example of what magic is this, we get death. And then you say, okay, is this relating to how we nail it? Is this like whatever it is, it's deadly? Or is it whatever we need to kill what? Maybe the earlier traditions or whatever. We don't know, right? So here you have it. So we are always met by some kind of challenging thought, when we put 3 cards down, and precisely when we don't impose any position. Because if I had said, this is the past, this is the present, and this is the future, then it's the lazy approach, then I'll say, so death is the past, force is the future, pope is the present, pope is the future, and then I can just say, well, you are done with your past, and now you have to strengthen your spine, your moral spine, and then you'll be ready to teach your courses. Okay. So, so you can also do a lot of that kind of message, no problem. But you see, when you don't impose any spread positions onto the cards, then if you want to challenge yourself and not die from boredom, right? Then you do what I do, you try and see what kind of synthesis arises out of what kind of story do you have, or even here, like immediately what I noticed was the movement of the heads, 2 dead heads become 1 big head, and then again the heads of the disciples. So there is a movement also there from the cold death, to the fresh blood in those. I can imagine the nice young sexy monks, sitting there waiting for the big pope to make his transmission or deliverance or whatever. So you can talk so much about that stuff, but to begin with, what is the challenge? And indeed here, if you were to ask me, quite honestly, maybe I'm not exactly as yet, determined regarding, whether we are with the deadly situation, whether we are with the death of a tradition, or whether we are with just cutting into the essentials that we then, try to, in a strong way, let's just say, transmit to another person or people, our disciples. So that's the next course. And then what else? iCorner Press will have all my books. So, and I'm easily, people can just find me. I mean, I'm on all social media.
Where's your website? Where can people find most of your work?
Well, I have my name, CameliaElias.com. So people go there, then they can get redirected to Aradia Academy. There's aradiaacademy.com. If people are interested in my services, the reading services, then they can go to readlikethedevil.com.
Wonderful.
I have 3 websites. But if one goes to either of these websites, they will have a link to my private persona, private public, I don't other activities. So it's very easy. Yeah.
Perfect. I will have links to all of those in the show notes. Those links will be in the show notes at whatmagicisthis.com. Also on whatmagicisthis.com, you can find links to my Twitter account, my Instagram account, and my Facebook account. If you enjoy the show, please tell a friend. Perhaps they'll tell a friend, and then they'll tell a friend. It's important. I think I'm doing something kind of cool here, so if you spread the word, it's well and truly appreciated. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review for me either on iTunes or Stitcher or anywhere else. Of course, there's the whole click the star thing, 1 to 5 stars. That's all well and good, but if you can say something, write a little bit about how much you enjoy the podcast, that would be appreciated. People do read those reviews, and a lot of times when they do, they'll be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to check this podcast out, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. Do you think that I'm doing something special? I certainly do, but if you think I am, then why don't you try and support the show? There are 3 ways of doing that. The very first way is the best way, and that is to subscribe on Patreon. It's only $7 a month. It can be found at patreon.com/whatmagicisthis. $7, again, that's all I ask, and that gives you access to tons of exclusive content, including episodes that I do about certain entities and saints, as well as how I do my magic. We have episodes on Goetia and Grimoires. I do episodes on books. I just did one on The Trickster and the Paranormal, a book by George P. Hansen. Everybody loves the exclusive content that I produce on my Patreon account. And the person that likes it the most is me, because I get to be incredibly creative with the things that I do there. I really get to flex my creativity. I get to try new things, and people seem to really enjoy it. It also gives you access to a Patreon exclusive Discord server where you can talk with me, perhaps some of my previous guests, as well as people that are just beginning in magic. It is a wonderful community and no doubt worth the price of admission alone. There's lots of really great people there. But all of those things are available on the Patreon, patreon.com/whatmagicisthis. I also have videos in which I go through certain things like how to set up an ancestral altar, how to make your own incense, how to petition St. Expedite. I know I say this every week, but truly, it is fantastic. I don't just stare into a camera and talk at you. I take you through absolutely everything. People love the videos. It is fantastic. I just did one on fire cleansing as well, which if you haven't heard of it, you got to check that one out. But all of those things are on the Patreon. That is only $7 a month. That is all I am asking, and that gives you tons of exclusive content. I make as much content for my Patreon as I do the regular podcast. That is where I want to see you. Another way to support the show is through PayPal. Head to whatmagicisthis.com, click on any one of the PayPal me links there, and you could donate $5, $10, $20, $2,060, and it all goes back into making this podcast run. It's not cheap having a podcast, and so things as far as hosting the podcast, as well as my website, as well as paying for subscriptions for recording services, plugins to make my show sound super duper, all of those things cost money. And so if you donate on PayPal, that goes right back into keeping the fires at What Magic Is This burning. The final way of supporting the show is to just grab yourself a little bit of merchandise and do a little bit of advertising on my behalf. It's well and truly appreciated. If you want mugs, t-shirts, tote bags, stickers, fridge magnets, even a little onesie for your toddler, all of that stuff can be bought. Just head to whatmagicisthis.com, go to the top right, the menu there, click that, click merchandise. Anything you want is going to be there. There's so much stuff, and I have 7 designs that I made myself, and I think they look pretty snazzy. Well, it's actually not true. I had a couple of people actually do some designs for me, and those are there as well. But if you want to show your support, somebody's going to stop you in the street and say, "What magic is this?" When they see you in your "What Magic Is This" t-shirt, you'll say, "It's a great podcast. You should listen to it. Listen to all of them. Listen to every single one." And then do as I do and either buy some merch, support on Patreon, or do a PayPal. And yeah, that's a great way of showing how much you love the things that I'm doing, because truthfully, I think that what I'm doing is pretty important. I don't think there's any other podcast quite like this one, and I think we're doing something special. But the place that I really want to see you would be the Patreon. That is the best stuff. It's like a whole different podcast, and it's only for $7 a month. People love it. I love it. It is great times all around. But all of those things, all of the links, everything from the show notes to all of the links, including a way to find Camelia Elias's stuff, that can be found at whatmagicisthis.com. We'll see you there. Camelia, I want to thank you so much for coming on What Magic Is. That was a whirlwind. I'm just going to say this, I have never recorded a podcast episode like this, and I'm so excited about all of your enthusiasm and your answers. There's a lot that for people to unpack here in this one, and I hope that if some point in the future I was to ask you to come back on the show, you'd say yes.
I would. Thank you so much. Well, there is a lot more to say. I mean, I don't know. So just, I don't even know. Maybe I was a bit too rambling there, but
I loved it. I think it was amazing. It was exactly what the doctor ordered.
That is the one that I never think about. Because I'm always like, the tarot is just a bunch of images that you put on your table, and then you start reading, calling very simple, the rules of keeping it simple and read. Let's pontificate now here at the end. Read without holding any kind of belief. You see,
there we go.
I'm not the kind who is invested in any beliefs and emotions. I'm the cold bitch, who likes to slash a few throats here and there. Cutting to the essential, but belief, because this is one of the things, and in fact, I always entice my own students or my own clients also when we see anything in that. Let's keep an eye for that window that this image is open onto, so that we can reflect further, yet without investing any belief or investing any emotion. Don't get overly excited about anything. Right. That's only gonna render you in some kind of ditch, and you're not gonna like it. So so it's like, how can you just get the sense of what astonishes you? I mean, that's the beauty of divination in general. And here I'm not referring just to the cards, but astrology for that matter, or communing with the demons or angels or whatever occult enterprise others may have a penchant for, So I always say, keep it simple and don't get too emotionally invested, and then you're gonna see how you can spot the line and the dot,
That's right.
Or movement, move. How do things move? Because it's a very dynamic process. Yeah.
Definitely. I just say, get them on the table. Get the cards on the table and have a look.
Read the damn cards.
Read the damn cards. Wonderful. Camelia, thank you so much for joining me today. And that's the episode, everybody. I hope that you learned something. This one, listen to it once, listen to it twice, listen to it 3 times, one for each card. But I want to thank you, and I want to thank the listeners for tuning into this one. That's all we have. So we'll come on back to What Magic Is This. We'll talk about more of this wonderful minor arcana, pips, and all of the great things that you all love about the world of magic and the occult. Until next time, I want each and every one of you to stay healthy, stay hopeful, and stay luminous. We will talk at you soon. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.